You talk about Jameson Williams maybe being the fifth most important player on this team.
By far the weakest part of his game is his ability to beat press coverage.
We have to set some expectations for a guy who is a first-round pick where the team moved up to get him.
Look at the release.
There's your separation. Great route. Stutter and go. Gets by clean.
That is unbelievable.
Maybe the greatest catch I've ever seen.
We're talking about a player, Jameson Williams, 12 games, okay? He had 24 receptions on 42 targets for 354 yards, 2 touchdowns, a 57.1% catch rate, a little bit less than 15 yards per reception, and he did add a 20-yard rush as well. This is the player, ladies and gentlemen. That is, we're going to have to both sides it with Jameson. This is the player. What is going on? I don't understand. Is it the Alabama thing? Is it what is it about? Is it the Detroit? It must be the Alabama thing combined with the Detroit thing, because Detroit fans are crazy, Alabama fans are crazy. I don't know. I'm very confused. But he didn't put up a big number last year, and to me, this is a guy that I guess he's still just finding his sea legs in regards to football. And from what I read in your profile as well, that seemed to kind of bear out on tape as well. So,
just kind of a table setter here. I do think one of the big reasons that he's a polarizing player, I guess, is because he's a former first-round pick, and we just haven't seen a lot of him, and that can elicit reactions on both sides too. Because by the way, I will just say overall. I guarantee you I'm going to start this discussion and end this discussion the same way, which is I don't really have a very strong feeling on how this one is going to play out. I don't have a real strong take on this one, which is, again, ironic because people seem to have very, very strong feelings and opinions on what Jameson Williams will or will not be. I'm kind of actually, one subscriber told me this morning that was the longest shrug he's ever read, which is – I think it actually might be, and you can tell I'm leaning into this too, because I think this might be the longest profile I've ever written, James, in the website's history. Yeah, it was like 1,400 words, and I usually try to not make them that long. The one thing I think I actually believe pretty strongly is that the typical analysis for players, which is like guys haven't produced to this X standard through 2 years or whatever, we can write those guys off. I don't think that's fair in this situation because, let's just be honest, man. This guy has had a weird career. There's really no other way to put it. And some of it's self-inflicted and some of it's not, right? He comes into the NFL with often a very late ACL tear. Yeah. So we kind of knew his rookie season was going to be a wash. And then last season, which is essentially his first real season, he's got, he gets himself a gambling suspension, which is his fault. I have no sympathy for these guys with the gambling stuff. That's his fault. But then also he picks up injuries. There's some just kind of discontent between him and the coaching staff based on some of the public comments, right? So again, some of it is not his fault, injuries, things like that. Some of it maybe is his fault. So we just haven't seen a guy that has he just hasn't had a normal career. He's had a weird career. So I think that's why I try to put so much context behind his evaluation because almost in a way, James, I think that the profile reads and the reception perception data reads as a guy, this is a little bit of a Rorschach test. You can kind of see whatever you want in this profile. We can just get into sort of some of the higher level stuff before we start doing splits and things like that. Because what I think is interesting with Williams is that he pretty much is just lined up as an X receiver, right? In the sample of games, and I got a full sample, full 8-game sample for Jameson Williams for reception perception. Lined up on the line of scrimmage on 85.6% of his sampled snaps. He's outside for 72.6. As the season wore on, they kind of moved him into some different alignments, and maybe they designed a few more plays for him, but primarily he was their outside X receiver, on the line of scrimmage, and he's running vertical routes and stuff like that. I actually kind of don't love that usage for him necessarily because even based on his college profile, and this is borne out in the NFL profile, by far the weakest part of his game is his ability to beat press coverage. Williams' 69.4% success rate versus press coverage is a little lower than some of the other top prospects in the class, trailing Olave, Wilson, and London. It's certainly the weakest part of his evaluation. Williams is not consistently good at defending physical cover or defeating physical coverage. When a corner digs his hands on him, he can get caught up at the line when combat gets started. That's going to be a natural issue when a receiver is this slight a frame. That has continued in the NFL. Obviously, the overall success rates for Williams are poor. 13th percentile against man, 12th percentile against zone, 15th percentile against press. I definitely think that the press coverage number is the biggest concern.
Okay, so want to again, if you're new to reception perception, for example, what do we look for in terms of baseline, success rates versus typical coverages, right? We want to see from a good player about 70% success rate versus man and about 80% success rate versus zone, right? On the season-long profile for Jameson Williams, Matt has him at 57% success rate versus man. Again, well below 70%, and then 72% success rate versus zone. Again, a good chunky, percentage points, number of percentage points below 80% as well. Okay, now that being said, you even wrote this in the profile, and I've read all of your profiles. I don't remember you taking this much time to talk about splits between early season, late season, and yet you did it for Jameson Williams. And the numbers on the back end, Matt, they're really, really interesting. Okay, because again, we talk about you want to get to about 80% success rate versus zone. And then when you're taking a look at from week 15 and on, 85% success rate versus zone for Jameson Williams. That's pretty good.
Yeah, so the reason I did this was because when you look back at the season-long data, it's really, really bad. It's bad. But remember you and I talked about him in season because I did some in-season work on him. I think it actually might have just been on the Sicko stream. And it was horrific. The results were catastrophically bad. And I mean, we're talking in the Justin Hunter zone for Jameson Williams. And in those 3 games that I worked on during the season, was week 11 through 13. I believe it was the Bears, the Saints, and the Packers. And like I said, unspeakably poor results. We're talking where I was reading off 15th percentile. Shoot, 15th percentile is way north of what Jameson Williams was doing to start there. So when I come back to the sample, and add these last 5 games in, I sampled all games that were from week 15. Remember that Broncos game where they beat the crap out of the Broncos and Williams had himself a couple of moments. That was sort of when people started being like, ooh, is Jameson Williams coming on, right? And I was kind of I don't know, because, just back in the season, I don't know about all that because I just watched those 3 games. I just started those 3 games and they were just truly a non-functional NFL player. The charting process in the offseason was all these week 15 games through the playoffs, the Rams game, the NFC Championship game, some of those later season games, pretty nice performances for Williams. And while I'm charting them, I'm this isn't that bad, right? It was almost like a feel thing, right? Where this isn't a horrendous player, but the final numbers are going to look so bad because he had such because he had such a far way to go, right? We're talking about, again, he was coming up from 30% success rate versus man, 23% success rate versus press. So just with that alone, there was no way he was going to have a good profile. Period. Those three games, weeks 11 through 13. Nothing before then really matters because he wasn't playing a full load of snaps. I mean, I don't even know. Maybe those games were even worse. But there was just no way that he was going to have a good end of full sample results based on those 3 games. So I did think it was instructive to, let's cut those games out and see what the week 15 week 15 on sample gives us. And the alignment's the same. Actually, a lot of the route data is kind of is similar-ish, in terms of the numbers are higher, but what's good and what's bad actually looks pretty similar. But the results overall success rates are definitely different. So if you just use those week 15 games on, Williams checks in with the 67.3% success rate versus man, 84.9% success rate versus zone, and 64.7% against press. Those are still like mixed bag, I would say, results, but they're far more encouraging than what we saw in the full season sample.
Oh, listen, if you go 67 versus man, 85 versus zone, I mean, okay, well, now we're talking you can start in the NFL. I mean, this is that's a starter level, and a pretty good starter. To be honest, you have a strength. Like this is a guy that could play in the NFL, and not just play pretty well. You know, again, maybe he's not an all-pro, he's not superstar, whatever, but he's going to play pretty well. 67 versus man, 85 versus zone, that's pretty good. You take that each and every time. But when you kind of mix those in with the season-long results, it doesn't look that good. All right, so
it's actually just if I could offer like a comparison, really, James. I mean, it's not too dissimilar. That those results alone are not too dissimilar from like a Zay Flowers, right? Where he was a little bit better against man, but similar press results, similar zone results. So kind of like in that bucket of guy, like, maybe not a superstar receiver, but definitely a starter. Right. The success rate versus zone is pretty instructive for the routes that he does run well. Like if you look at his route tree, and this is the case, even like I said, the numbers are a little higher across the board, but like where he wins is still true when you look at this, like the strong split from week 15 on. He's not good really running slants. He's not that great working back to the quarterback necessarily. Comeback routes are low. The curl route is low. The curl route did get better actually throughout the course of that like mini sample. That's the one sort of caveat there, which is interesting because that's something I think he wasn't. That was sort of one of my questions about him coming into the NFL. I thought he worked well in a straight line. He didn't necessarily work back to the quarterback very well. So to see him improve a little bit on that throughout the course of the second half of the season, the final chapter of the season, that's interesting to note. But really what he does well are like big over routes. Post-route success rate, 74.3% in the overall sample of the season. That's good. Dig route, 77.8%. Very good mark there, especially because
really good.
Yeah, especially because both those routes he ran at a rate above the NFL average. The corner route, 61.9%. He ran that at above the NFL average rate. So I think we could also look at Jameson Williams and say he is a guy, if you're taking just the full sample and really also this micro sample too, you're looking at a guy who is maybe not good at everything. Maybe he doesn't have a wide skill set. But like this narrow view of what we're looking at him, he's actually pretty good at these things. And if you think about it, James, like big overs against zone coverage, I mean, you're going to get a lot of that when you're and I keep saying this about him, probably like the fifth option, not in the passing game, but just like in the offense, right? Because like think about if you're a team that's preparing to play the Lions, you're thinking more so about like, these two running backs, how do we stop this run game? What do we do about Amon-Ra St. Brown? Let's look at Sam Laporta, right? It's like you're going to have Jameson Williams on some baby soft coverage against zones, running, even if he's an X receiver on a lot of snaps. And he can get and like over routes on play action. Jared Goff loves to throw those over routes on play action.
Again, you talk about Jameson Williams maybe being the fifth most important player on this team. I mean, you look at the wide receiver room, Matt, and they didn't address it in the draft at all. They didn't really address it in the offseason at all. Maybe the most notable move is that they brought in Traquan Smith, right? But
oh boy, it's a wide receiver room that isn't that deep, to be honest with you. And as a matter of fact, if you're looking at just where this team might be really weak, it's got to be at the wide receiver spot. They've got Donovan Peoples-Jones. Again, they signed Traquan Smith. They've got a longtime Lion and Khalif Raymond there. And then Jameson Williams, who's a first-round pick. That's not a good room. And again, we love Amon-Ra St. Brown. You and I were the first people on board that Amon-Ra train, okay? But again, it's just that's not a good room, man. That's an awfully fragile room. And quite frankly, it's a little bereft of overall talent. Yeah, that's the thing like throughout the course of this discussion, the important thing to remember for Williams is that like, okay, like maybe he'll be this, maybe he'll be that. The Lions need him to be,
real bad.
At the very least, the player we're describing from like a player they can count on to be at least the guy that we're talking about from the final 5 games, and probably more than that. Is a guy that can consistently get open against zone. I think they probably need him to be more of a press man beater. Like, it is interesting. I think the first thing people will see is if they just look at the route charts, right, for Jameson Williams, is like that 45.2% success rate on 9 routes. Did improve over the course of like in the final 5 games. It did get better, but I think people think like, oh, fast receiver, like, you know, he should be beating teams over the top. And like, yeah, when he gets like off man coverage or you know, zones, he can definitely get you over the top for sure. But he does struggle to like win against press and like stack defensive backs on the outside. And like I said, that was the biggest problem for him as a collegiate prospect too. Like, there were definitely times where he would line up in the slot and literally run a post route and outrun the entire, like an entire SEC defense. You saw that in college. I don't know if he's definitely fast. I don't know if he's quite that fast anymore because he did tear his ACL, right? Like there's a chance he's lost a little bit of speed. But still, he's incredibly fast. But there's more to being a vertical receiver than just being fast and just running a straight line. It's even just running a 9 route. I will say I think his ball skills are better than probably I would have given him credit for. Like, he impressed me a little bit more as a ball winner. Super small sample, like everything is with Jameson Williams, but he did 21.4% of his sample targets. He had an 83.5% contested catch rate. Didn't drop a pass in that sample. That was good. That was good. I think like if he can make those plays, that's good. I don't think it's as simple as Jameson Williams just inhales all of Josh Reynolds' volume. We like to think it's that simple. Like, oh, Josh Reynolds just out. Like, Williams will just assume all of that. I would be pretty surprised if that's what happens, but he can still be a very effective player and a very useful player for Detroit on like 16% of the targets, which I think is pretty possible here. But I just like, yeah, you're right. The rest of the wide receiver room, like, who's stepping up to inhale some of this other volume here?
I think the fact that they made moves to go get DPJ and Traquan Smith, and we kind of sort of chuckle about the Traquan Smith thing. I mean, that's the one thing we know he can do is try to go, eat up ground deep, right? So
True.
I think the Lions are telling you, too, that they're not 100% sure about Jameson Williams. I think, look, they spent a first-round pick on him. They're going to give him, Matt, every opportunity in
Trade
the
it up,
world.
too.
Exactly. They're going to give him every opportunity in the world to prove them right. Okay? But if it doesn't work out, that's why they go make moves for DPJ and Traquan Smith. Because again, to your point, when you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta and those running backs, you have to clear some room in the middle of the field. Somehow, some way. You can't get that defense compressed down. Otherwise, your whole offense just sinks. And oh, by the way, you take away that short intermediate middle against Jared Goff. Listen, nobody loves Jared Goff more than me. Okay, I love Jared Goff. I do. Okay, I'm caping up for Jared. I'm like his lone. I'm that gif of that of that guy pulling out a sword against the horde. That's me with
Jon
Jared
Snow.
Goff.
Yeah, some guy. But
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, whatever. Who cares? I love Game of Thrones. Sure. Anyways, whatever. the point that I'm making here, though, is because I do love Jared Goff, but I know Jared Goff. And if you take away that intermediate middle, there's not much left, man. Like, that's when the bad Jared Goff comes out. You know what I'm talking about? So they need somebody to clear out and open up that space, and generally that's going to be from either flanker or X and just trying to eat up some ground. And I think the Lions know that. Brad Johnson knows that. You know what I mean? Come on. They got to get this going here with Jameson Williams, but they're going to give him every opportunity to make it happen. I just don't know, man. I don't know. Obviously, from week 15 on, those numbers are really intriguing and really promising. But the fact that he's just not that good on 9 routes and just flat out horrible on slants, Matt, 61% success rate on slant routes, that's not good, man. That's not. We need that number up to like 75, 80%. He's at 61% on slants. Oh, that's bad. We have to set some expectations for a guy who is a first-round pick where the team moved up to get him. highly touted prospect out of Alabama. You have to set some baseline expectations. And I'm sorry. You cannot tell me that the baseline is he's still learning the position. You don't spend a first round pick on that guy. You don't do that. To me, I'm willing to give him the grace. He missed football for a long time. Had that suspension to start the year. I'm totally down to do that. But I draw the line in the sand, man. When we start talking about this guy still needs to learn the position and do all those things, that's not acceptable for a first round pick.
I didn't say it was acceptable. I just said it is what it is. Like, I mean, that's the reality of where he is at as a player. And I think that we are asking, depending on your expectations, like that's what I think you need to, like, if you read this profile and you want to like be optimistic, I think that's totally fine. I think, again, there's enough little like kernels in here that, like I said, it's a Rorschach test. If you want to be optimistic, I think you can do that with the Jameson Williams profile. But I just want you to then think in your mind, like, okay, this is what he was last year.
Yeah.
Where am I asking him to go? Like, how high am I asking him to fly here? Basically is kind of what I'm encouraging people to ask. Now, I think I want to present a couple of scenarios here for like comparisons for Jameson Williams, like just using the full season numbers, which, to refresh, 57.5% success rate versus man, 72.1% success rate versus zone, 53.3% success rate versus press. Not good numbers, okay? So I think you can look through the historical database. I tried to do a little bit more of this in this like drop, the year 3 to 4 player drop that we're discussing here in the profiles. Like, let's look at historical comparables. I mean, you can find plenty of players. I mean, you can find some bad players here, right? Some like Nelson Aguilar. You can find Preston Williams. Remember him?
Oh boy,
you probably don't. You probably don't need to. Quincy Enunwa, like, these guys that like didn't really have many moments. Paris Campbell is in this range. Kelvin Benjamin is in this range. MVS is in this range. There are guys like that. Now, obviously, I think if you want to go like median case scenario, there's like Gabe Davis is in this range. Okay. 57.8% success rate versus man, 72.7% success rate versus zone, 58.9% success rate versus press. Like, by the way, I think that if Jameson Williams turns into Gabe Davis, based on first round pick, they trade up from all that stuff, based on the film that's been out there so far, like, I actually think that's a win for the Lions. If this year he becomes Gabe Davis, I think that's a win for the Detroit Lions. Now, I think I can paint you like a ceiling comparison here. Like, if just, let's say everything breaks right, he fills in, he really is like he's a good player. Okay. I think like he could be maybe Saints Brandon Cooks, who actually didn't perform that well in reception perception early in his career. 53.8% success rate versus man as a rookie. Actually, let's do second season, 2015. 55.3% success rate versus man, 76.4% against zone, 52.7% against press. By the way, he faced a ton of press that year in kind of like a rocky second season because teams knew, like, oh, we watched the film on him as a rookie and like we could press the shit out of this guy. And it's not going to go well. And it didn't go well. And eventually, like, Brandon Cooks is a good player, but like he got jumped almost immediately by Michael Thomas as the number 1 receiver when they drafted him, I think throughout the course of his NFL career, Brandon Cooks was like a good 2 at his ceiling, but really not a full, didn't until he went to the Rams in like 2018 did he become like a full field receiver. Really in that Saints year, in that Saints kind of run, he was mostly just like over routes, like posts and these deep corners and stuff like that. Kind of the Jameson Williams route tree, better against zone than man. Kind of the Jameson Williams profile. So I think if you want to squint and see like a best case scenario, maybe he's early career Brandon Cooks.
Bro, how many targets do you think he sees? Again, let me just lay the table out here. Like, Amon-Ra St. Brown saw 164, right? Sam Laporta saw 120, right? Like, how much meat is left on this bone here? Like, what you think? I don't care the rosiest outlook you've got for Jameson Williams. He's not seeing 100 targets in this offense. There's no way.
I think he could get to maybe 100 because again, like if you just look at Josh Reynolds, this is what's not going to happen. Okay, like you can't just say, like I said earlier, week 15 on because that we're giving him the benefit of the doubt and we're doing week 15 on, right?
Yeah.
He had an 11.4% target share, 25 targets in 6 games for him. Josh Reynolds, 29 targets, 11.5% target share in 7 games for Josh Reynolds. So that's like 4 targets per game for both these guys. I don't think that he's just going to get 8. You know, I don't think he's just going to assume all of that work.
No, that would be
he would
ridiculous.
have to require some of these other guys to lose out, like St. Brown's not losing out. But so let's just say he gets like 7 over the course of 17 games. That's 119 targets, right? If he gets 6 per game over the course of 17 games, that's 102. So like I do think he could get to maybe like 102, 6 targets per game. High yield player, high yield on the targets, not a high target earner. Maybe, but there's definitely going to be there will totally be games when whoever has like Jameson Williams on their fantasy team is like, why did he only get 1 target? And they like blow some team out, 35-10 while St. Brown catches 12 and all these other guys do plenty. That's going to happen.
Yeah, no. 6 targets a game for me seems awfully high for this kind of player, man. I don't know. I think if he gets to 5 targets a game, I think that would be about right for me.